Okay, so we all know how the story goes, right?
Tabloid press were all over Oasis. You know, if Liam went for, well, you've seen it, if Liam went for a pint of milk, he was on the telly.
It was mania.
But that definitely wasn't the whole picture.
That moment in time when they were just on their way to superstardom. Bizarre.
Celebrating 25 years of Oasis's iconic debut album, Listen Up. This podcast series brings together those closest to the band.
In the very early days, we were just having bed and breakfast or whatever and save money. We'd all just pile into one room and share beds.
The industry makers and shakers.
Richard Ashcroft said, "Is it always like that between you two?"
And their peers who watched in awe.
It comes down to songs and it comes down to attitude.
And feeling some kind of freedom. And with your friends, it was celebrating the euphoria of life.
This is Listen Up, the Oasis podcast.
Will people still be listening to Definitely Maybe in 25 years? Absolutely, definitely.
The people's story of Definitely Maybe. Hello, I'm Elizabeth Olker, and coming up in part 3. As Oasis fever grips the UK, it starts to take its toll on fans.
I was holding down a really good job in a relationship with a beautiful girl who I adored, and I had my own flat, and I fucking threw it all away.
I would wake up thinking about Oasis. Wouldn't want to discuss anything with anyone if it wasn't about Oasis.
Plus, what was it really like to live through the era known as Cool Britannia?
People look back now at kind of the whole Cool Britannia thing, a little bit embarrassed or cringy or sneery, and we shouldn't. It did feel like an exciting period. And I'm not the only person I've spoken to that feels that, you know.
But as Cool Britannia ruled the airwaves in the UK, Oasis was starting to catch the attention of music fans right across the globe. Fellow musicians too, including Lars Ulrich, the drummer in the biggest heavy metal band at the time, Metallica.
It was right around when the record came out. There was a report from an Oasis gig, and I guess Paul Weller walked into the dressing room, and there was this whole exchange that the journalist was writing about between Paul Weller and Noel Gallagher, which was basically like, "Hey, you cunt. Hey, you fucking cunt. Your band is shit. No, your band is shit. Your band is fucking more shit." It was like that for about 2 or 3 paragraphs. And I was like, okay, wow. That was kind of a different kind of thing, a different kind of language, a different kind of culture. And then interspersed, obviously, was we're the fucking best band in the world. And then, no, I'm the best songwriter in the world. And I'm the best fucking whatever in the world. And it was just like, wow. At that time, the grunge era was still in full effect, and everything that was coming out of America and so on was all about not being able to handle fame and, you know, being driven or chasing it or wanting to sell records or wanting to appear like you were hungry for success or anything. So this felt like what I was reading felt like a very different culture, a different kind of approach. And within another week or two, I was driving down the hill from where my house was. And I remember clearly, the local station in San Francisco called Live 105. That was kind of the local, hipper, alternative rock station or whatever. And I was driving down the hill, and I was flipping through the stations, and there was a song that was on Live 105, and it just oozed fucking attitude and swagger, and it just sounded unlike anything I'd ever heard, and it was just really different from what was coming out of the speakers, you know, through the radio at that time. And I was like, maybe that's that band that I read about a couple of weeks ago in that magazine. And then at the end of it, the DJ was like, and that's a new band from England called Oasis and a song called Supersonic. And I was like, fuck yeah, that had to be that band. It just had to be them. And it was. Since then, I instantly just became a fan and sort of kind of mesmerized with that whole thing, because it was just so different from what was going on, the rock climate in America at the time. And it was very much in line with the stuff that had always spoken to me when I was growing up in Denmark, and the kind of the dangerous side of rock and roll and the unpredictability of rock and roll. All the greats, from whether it would be, Jim Morrison to the Bon Scotts to the Ritchie Blackmores to the Iggy Pops to the Axl Roses, that element of danger. And it was just right up my straws, as they say. So I instantly became a fan.
It was time for the band to embark on their Definitely Maybe world tour. First stop, Europe.
Whilst there was a lot of bands who came from Britain at the time that had lots of success, they were different because they were actually like a rock and roll band. They got their songs in at that time in 3.5 minutes, Most people had a dance beat under their songs and needed 6.
Torsten Luth was the German product manager for Definitely Maybe.
We did promo together. We used to go out in the evenings together. We went through fucking Cologne together and visited places. I'll never forget Liam Gallagher looking at the Dome of Cologne, which is this huge fucking cathedral. And he said, "What's that?" And that's like, the Dome. It's a big cathedral. And he means like, does it work? And I'm looking at him going, it's a cathedral. What do you mean, does it work? And he was like, yeah, is it a working cathedral? It's like, yes, it's a working cathedral. I don't know whether you can call God from there directly, but, But yes, he was very inquiring to see whether the cathedral worked. Whilst everybody else in Europe, they were like lapping it up, Germany was like, really? For people who loved English music? Of course, the shows were sold out, but it wasn't like that German media was falling over themselves trying to write positive about them and do stuff, You have that. Like my Swedish colleague, she couldn't do anything wrong. Whatever she did, the press wrote it, the band came. I mean, God's sake, they interviewed Maggie, the tour manager in Sweden, just because they needed to get... We didn't have that, People were very reserved. They were more like, this is just another British hype. Do we really need this? Yeah, Germany was hard work.
The Germans might have been hard to conquer, but the French seemed to be a pushover. Michel Vidal was a press officer at Sony in Paris back in 1994.
Very quickly the band got a lot of attention because the first time they came to France was mid of June 1994. They did a club gig in Paris. They did quite a lot of press interviews, radio interview. They did a big TV show at the time. And very quickly, the media knew that something would happen with Oasis. The French were always into good rock and roll. They did always like the Who, the Rolling Stones, and of course the Beatles. There was something of everything of that in Oasis. I remember the first time I called some journalist at Télérama, which is a big cultural weekly here, called him and said, I have to speak to you about a new band, and I called Oasis. And Oasis in France, is a soft drink like orange juice. It was always at the time of the TV, in the adverts, So there was this kind of famous jingle, and the guy answered by singing the advert of the Oasis soft drink. He was joking because of the name of the band. When I could speak face-to-face with them, I could understand them, Sometimes I had to ask again, what did you say, please, Noel? What did you say, please, Liam? But when they were all talking together, many times I couldn't understand what they were saying. They were speaking so fast with the Mancunian accent. But even when I couldn't understand anything, they were always very, very, very funny.
Italian fan Adele Vanelli.
I was in the last year of high school, and I was at the time I would have to decide what to do in my life. Around this time, I started going to this club in Milan called Rainbow. One evening, they played a song that immediately struck a chord with me. So after finish, I went to the DJ to ask what the song was called. He told me it's called Supersonic. Didn't know who they were, but I began to feel alive for the first time ever. From that day, I dreamed of seeing them live, and the dream became a reality a few months later. It was generally the gig that changed my life. I don't know how it happened, but after the concert, I got given a backstage pass that allowed me to meet the band. It was like meeting friends and not rock stars. They made me feel part of their world and that there was no difference between them and us fans. Of that period, I have some excellent memories. The anger I had within had softened, I think, by the music. We had no internet or cell phones. We were just connected to them by their music. I was thanks to them that I started to love myself for who I was a little more.
Thank you very much. Tell me how high do you think you go before you start falling?
If the band thought the crowds in Europe were raucous, they were in for a shock when they touched down in Tokyo. PR man Johnny Hopkins.
Noel had been to Japan before when he was roadieing for the Inspiral Carpets. So he kind of seen Japanese audiences and knew how the record labels worked. You know, he sort of prepped the band for what to expect, you know, which was relatively calm audiences and everything. But when we got there, the response, they were followed down the street by hundreds of fans, like kind of in those early Beatles films like Help and Hard Day's Night, except it was real. This was a different country altogether, and the response in Japan was even more insane than it had been in the UK.
They played this small club in Shibuya, the Club Quattro. They did 3 concerts in Club Quattro. I saw the first 2 ones, and I remember that the very first one is one of my best memories of Oasis at concert.
It's about time our youth ran today, you know what I mean? We had a proper fucking band, man, in meaning. Yeah? It's about time we had some fucking bands to the shit ones, you know what I mean? And now we're going to see it this time. You know what I'm talking about, it's on a show.
When I was hanging out with the band backstage after the gig, it was time to go out in the street to their van. There was a group of maybe 10, 20 Japanese kids waiting for them to get signatures. But not only they were waiting for them, they just rushed to them. You know, it was just like miniature Oasis mania. You know, it was not scary, but surprising. You know, all those kids running to the band. The Japanese were very, very much, very early into Oasis.
I'm going to sing this one, yeah? Tonight I'm a rock and roll star. I'll sing it, yeah? Let's make it special until February.
After a whirlwind tour of Japan, the next stop was the all-important US of A.
They did the shows in Japan and they had absolute hero worship in the UK and Europe, both from the public and from the media. And straight after playing that Japanese tour, they headed to LA without a break. It's a long plane journey. And it also coincided with Liam's 21st birthday. And because of the international dateline or timeline, it was actually his birthday twice. So he celebrated it twice, and the rest of the band celebrated it twice. Not only were they knackered from touring Japan and touring England relentlessly for about 12 months, they were kind of out of their mind, really.
Chasing the band across the States was Brian Cannon.
I had flown to San Francisco, and the idea was they were going to do a gig in San Francisco, and then I think they played in Sacramento, I could be wrong, and then Los Angeles, which was the famous Whiskey A Go Go gig.
This one's for all you cowboys.
The hot glare of LA, not only the heat, but all the media and the industry wanting to be impressed. American audiences are really tough. They want a show, and they're very, very suspicious of bands that are flavour of the month in England. In fact, they're very suspicious of bands from England anyway.
The fans that night in LA had reason to be suspicious. The evening before, the band were involved in a punch-up in a nightclub, and earlier in the day, they'd all been thrown out of a radio station for swearing live on air. If the wheels weren't coming off, then the axles were definitely getting looser.
But there was no doubt about it, the drugs played, nobody could go to sleep, everybody was off their heads. You're talking about the most tight, consummate, professional band at that time I'd ever seen. And they were all playing different parts of the songs. Liam singing the wrong words. He hit Noel over the head with the tambourine on stage, and then it just went off afterwards. And Noel went up to Maggie, the tour manager, demanded the float, which I think was something like $700 in cash. Took that and shot off.
A few days went by, no one heard anything. One night I got home and there was a missed call, a message on my home answer phone. So I played it. There was just a sigh and a gap, and then someone putting the phone down.
And nobody knew where he'd gone. But I came up with an idea. I knew he'd been friendly with a girl in San Francisco, but I had her phone number. And I said to the tour manager, if you check Noel's phone records, if that number's on the list after this incident, he's gone to San Francisco, because nobody knew where he was. And sure enough, the number was there. And he was up there for a few days, and I think he wrote, did he write, it's good to be free there? He certainly wrote, talk tonight.
Sitting on my own, chewing on a bone, 1,000 million miles from home, when something hit me somewhere right between the eyes.
I met this sort of Oasis fan from San Francisco while I was on my travels. The songs like, she used to always drink that mad drink Snapple, and it was strawberry lemonade one, she was addicted to that. So that's why that's in there. And she took us around to the playgrounds where she used to play as a kid in, well, I don't know what they call them in America, but they're not called council estates, but it's the same type of thing. Projects or down the hood or whatever. So she took us around there, so it's all about that really. It's quite melancholy, but it's quite uplifting in the same way.
I wanna talk tonight until the morning light about how you saved my life. Let me see how we are. Let me see how we are.
The band all came back together in the studio in Texas, recorded some songs that included Talk Tonight and a couple of others that became B-sides. And the process of recording together kind of patched them back up.
The show was back on the road, thankfully for fans, including this one, Jay Lupis.
I saw them at the local 186 in Boston. I think it was October of '94. I remember lots of things about that gig because I made an effort to go and talk to the band after the show. I remember them putting away their own instruments. They didn't have anybody helping them out. My girlfriend's roommate at the time was very flirtatious with Tony McCarroll. Ended up actually getting us on their bus, which we then ended up taking them to a party in Boston. I remember when we were on our way to my friend's place, Liam got into a shopping cart that Bonehead was pushing. It was some random shopping cart that just happened to be on the sidewalk. Noel was the one that I actually spoke to the most. One of the posters hanging up in my friend's place was a poster of, I think it was the artwork from the Verve's Superstar, I think that was it. And we were looking at the poster, and he was talking about how much he loved that image and how much he loved the band. We connected at that point a bit, being a 20-year-old kid, kind of starstruck at the same time as well, in my own mind. I managed to get Noel's autograph on a Oasis Definitely Maybe postcard that I had picked up at one of the gigs. I bought every t-shirt that they put out. Remember, it was a white t-shirt with a swirly Oasis logo of a Union Jack flag. I wore that so much it had yellow armpit stains. Didn't care.
By this stage, Metallica's Lars Ulrich was such a big fan of the band. He was following them all round the US. And he even did a night as their lighting guy.
I always wanted to get closer. I was just really curious. I flew out to New Jersey and New York and saw a bunch of the shows, and they were playing down in New Jersey. I think it was down in like Ashbury Park or somewhere down the coast. And it was a place that was about the size of the car that I'm driving in right now. They didn't have many crew guys with them, and at some point in the show, I found myself up in front of a lighting desk, kind of tapping a lot. I think there were 12 different lights above the stage, and I would turn them on and off in connection to the music. That was fun. When we started touring in Europe in 1984, basically every single member of our road crew were like Brits. We were pretty quickly versed in British cheekiness and the wind-up mentality and the irony and the sarcasm and all that type of stuff. So, when I met them and they were cheeky and so on, I could be pretty cheeky back to them. And I think that's why we kind of got along. There was mutual respect, and obviously we came from different worlds and different backgrounds and grew up on different things. But ultimately, great music is great music. And why did Oasis connect at a different level? Sound was quite a bit heavier and their guitars were more distorted. Obviously, with certain songs like, Columbia, to me, they were just hard rock songs.
Jacqueline Satin was Oasis's radio promotions contact in the US back in the mid-90s.
On one of their first trips to New York, we decided to go record shopping. I think it was on a Sunday. They got everything. I just said, get whatever you want. And they really, really went deep. And so we had to take all the records. They were excited because I said I could mail them back to their place in the UK. So we went on a Sunday back into the Sony building with security and put them all in stacks to mail to their houses, and they thought it was so great. They used to stay at this hotel that was called the Riga Royale. It was on 54th between 6th and 7th. Right around the corner at 55th was this Irish pub, and it wasn't even called Irish Pub there, but it was just a place where we went to get a drink one time. I think I was the first person that went with them. But then it became the place because there was people from the UK who heard that that was where we were going to drink. So people started always going there to see if they would be there. And it became a constant place that we went as they got even bigger and bigger, but they always went to this one spot. And then I found out later, it's funny to go by there and it says the Irish Pub, and then it mentioned their name that they used to go there.
Stu Bergen was head of alternative record promotions at Epic Records.
It's important to understand that we were two people disconnected by a common language. They had to be subtitled when they went on MTV. Sometimes the dialogue would get lost in accent. I had a theory that when they wanted to be slightly more difficult, they laid it on a little bit thicker, and that was their way of taking the piss to a certain extent. I'll treat you like a queen. One of the criticisms of UK bands at the time were they'd come over for a 5-city tour and then would go home and not show up again. And they would think that was the big tour of the US that everybody waited for. Oasis, they didn't come for months on end, but they came over and over and over and reinforced and pushed it through. And the songs were unbelievable, so that often helps.
What a life it would be if you could come to mine for tea. I'll pick you up at 3:30. We'll have lasagna.
We're not going over there with the intention to break America. We're not going to go over there and try and crack the American market. What we've said is we'll go over there as many times as they'll pay for us to go over there, and as long as they don't push us like too hard and expect us to go over there for like 8 months solid. Our American company won't decide whether we break America, or the radio stations won't decide whether we break America, or MTV won't decide it. We'll do it the same as we're doing in England. We'll just go out and we'll play. And if we're good enough, people will buy the records, and if we're not, then we're not. But we'll still keep going back because it's free holiday, isn't it?
For anyone to say that Oasis did not break the US, I think that would be a gross mischaracterization of their success here in the US. They were the one UK rock and roll band that had a platinum album in over a decade. Live Forever was a big, big hit, a defining moment that opened the door for other UK artists to come behind them. I'm not sure that many of the great bands that followed that have had success since then might have not have gotten through the door had it not been for Oasis.
Whilst a lot of bands, just get bigger by playing various shows in their own market, they just jumped worldwide from one step to another, and 2 weeks later they did something else that was ginormous, and the British press obviously, I don't know whether hype's the right word, but they wrote about it like as something like this had never happened again, and then at some point that started to influence the rest of the world, plus the fact that America became successful, they did these American tours, wherever people went, something happened with Oasis, and whatever happened was always bigger than the thing that happened before, and everybody wanted to be part of it.
This is Listen Up, the people's story of Definitely Maybe. The Oasis podcast. With the world starting to take notice of the Oasis phenomenon, back in the UK, the band had kick-started a cultural revolution and sweeping up everyone before them. Here's Sean Rowley, who at the time was a TV producer.
I was holding down a really good job. I was literally holding down a really good job. I was a producer working at Planet 24 on The Big Breakfast, in a relationship with a beautiful girl who I adored, and I had my own flat, and I fucking threw it all away. I literally threw it all away. The arrival of Oasis and the release of Definitely Maybe in August coincided with me walking into the basement of a sweaty pub on a Sunday night to discover the joys of a club, the Heavenly Sunday Social. And the two factors, the emergence of Oasis and the beginnings of this club, were both moments that I felt like I belonged to something. It was just party central. And at the end of the night, if you were in a club, it would be all about piling back to someone's house and continuing the party back at someone's house. And of course, that would mean you'd always want to go back to someone's house who had a good record collection, that you could go through their record collection. And on certain occasions, that might involve someone who might be a bit of a known celebrity. So whether it was someone like Noel Gallagher or Norman Cook, you'd be back at someone's house and you'd be continuing your party, and music would be a massive part of that. And somehow one day I sat up and just came up with an idea, and the idea was, why don't we turn this into a broadcast? So the concept was to do a radio show that was centred around going back to someone's house at the end of the night and record them choosing the tunes that they wanted. So it was like a sort of, I don't know, it had an element of Desert Island Discs about it. But the thing that I really wanted to get right about it was capturing the spirit of the party so that it had quite a free-flowing feel about it. And I wrote a one-page treatment for it and called the show All Back to Mine. And Noel had said, literally, had gone, that sounds fucking brilliant. If you want to, I'll do it with you. And of course, here we sat at the point where it was like the biggest band in the land, and I was putting a treatment down in front of Radio 1, and they read the treatment and said, this sounds really interesting. And I went, yeah, and I've got Noel Gallagher to do the first one. At which point, I don't think there was any hesitation, and everyone just went, yeah, why don't you do it? And it ended up being broadcast on Christmas Day.
Hello?
No, it's Sean.
All right, Sean, just come up to the front.
Okay, mate.
See you in a bit. Welcome, my friend, to Supernova Heights. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, sir.
Yeah, take your seat. This is the boudoir.
Very nice as well.
Would you like a drink?
Oh, go on, twist me on. Is this where you play the music?
We've had proper pole-going sessions around here. We had the police around here one night on my 30th birthday, when there was I've got a coffee table downstairs, right, that holds about 4 ashtrays. There must have been 15 people on it, right? And the police turned up when we were singing And I Want to Be Anarchy. Excuse me, sir, can you turn the noise down? It's like, it's the Sex Pistols, man. You know what I mean?
Felix White would go on to form the successful group The Maccabees. But at the age of 10, for him, there was only one band in the whole world.
I would wake up thinking about Oasis. Wouldn't want to discuss anything with anyone if it wasn't about Oasis. Reciting Oasis, I'd spent most of my time lobbying, convincing people how much Oasis meant. And I was right in the middle of that kind of storm. Then I was 14, and you'd hang on what they would point you towards. So Noel had said in an interview, Hatford Hollow by the Smiths and Forever Changes by Love were great records. So that becomes your map, right? So you're like chasing back music from there. So I was in HMV in London, in Oxford Street, it's not there anymore, waiting to buy those 2 records. And my mate ran up to me and I could still see his face. He was pale and he goes, "It's Noel." I was, "What do you mean?" He's like, "It's Noel." And he dragged me by the arm from the counter. Noel was leaving HMV Oxford Street. Unsure what to do chasing him, I just chased him out of, because I thought this might be my only chance to meet Noel. Obviously, there's quite high security alarms in HMV Oxford Street. So as he's like about 2 metres ahead of me, I chase Noel out and it sets up the whole of fucking HMV Oxford Street. Noel turns round, 2 security guards flank me, and I'm going, "No, I'm buying these because of you." And they think that I'm nicking it and they drag me back into the store. And I thought I'd blow my chance with Noel. I'm sure he was getting quite a lot of that at the time. So he might have felt it's probably best not to save the day here. I went back in there, I bought both those records on the CD, and if I had to name 20 top records in my life, those 2 would probably be in it, alongside Definitely Maybe.
And with half of Britain wanting a slice of the band, Brian Cannon can remember the intense scrutiny they faced from the press.
Tabloid press were all over Oasis, you know. If Lee went for a pint of milk, he was on the telly. He was unbelievable doing that in shops, wasn't he, every 5 minutes. So he'd come round to our house on a Friday night, our flat, knowing that whatever happened, we're not going to sell toys to the press. We're the inner circle, you know, we're the team.
We just want to play music, right? And whatever they write about us in the press, it's to sell papers, right? We just want to play music. And if the press want to build us up as the Sex Pistols or the Z's and Marys and the Happy Mondays, then fine. I just want to play guitar, that's all I want to do.
One man who found himself in the right time and at the right place was Dominic Mohan, then the showbiz columnist for British tabloid newspaper The Sun.
Yeah, I mean, this all coincided with the rise of lads culture, if you like, in this country, and the emergence of magazines like Loaded, for instance, which I was a massive fan of. And I used to, you know, in a way, when I was editing Bazaar, I tried to bring a flavour of that to the column. And then hand in hand with football and fashion, you know, it did feel that we were at the centre of Cool Britannia.
Hamish McBain.
It definitely felt like it was permeating kind of football terrace culture. Like, there was no way your classic kind of football guy would have gone to see a band with guitars prior to that. They just wouldn't have gone. It just wasn't something that was on their radar at all. It definitely felt like it was very quickly like stretching out into places beyond the kind of indie circuit.
A lot of anger in the country at that time. If you think about the political backdrop, a lot of discontent with the Conservative Party. We felt the country needed a change. A lot of our generation felt quite disenfranchised, and obviously the emergence of Tony Blair as the kind of saviour of our younger generation, it all seemed to go hand in hand. And I was lucky enough, the impeccable timing that I had to chronicle this in some way to a mass audience.
By now, a cultural renaissance was underway in the UK, with Oasis slap bang in the middle of Cool Britannia and Britpop. Here's Felix White.
It's hard to kind of explain now. It was everywhere, even in primary school. It was such serious culture suddenly. I mean, I went to school in South London. People were pretending they were from Manchester, and they were 10, and like wearing Kangol hats and things like that. I was actually sorting out my flat the other day, and I had all my old school books that I've kept. I was going around the class and getting people to sign whether they liked Oasis or Blur more, and there was just the whole page is just full of Oasis, and one girl, bless her, called Rhiannon, has put her name down for Blur, and then she scratched it out and written Oasis. So for peer pressure, obviously. I can't really explain how central to culture it was.
Is there like a swear jar where every time you say the word Britpop you put a pound in? I don't think you need me to go into the finer details of where it began, who coined it, what was going on at the time, because I think it's just been so overly documented, that period in time. But I guess there's a reason, because we all had a fucking good time knocking around at that point.
With Battle of the Bands raging, Peter Hook recalls a chance meeting with both factions.
I remember one wonderful night in London when I bumped into Damon Albarn in Soho House, crying about the feud with Oasis. I then bumped into Liam, who was also crying about it as well. And I thought, no, Damon was very upset about it. And I think that he felt that me being from Manchester and obviously knowing them, he wanted to sort of apologise because he didn't mean it. I said, don't give a shit, mate, it's great.
Whatever I choose, and I'll sing the blues if I want.
We've gone on record of like dissing Blur and Suede and stuff like that, but
dissing, man.
But I've met like Damon and the guys out of Blur, and we can go out and have a drink, and that we don't hate anybody personally. It's just music, right?
And people look back now at kind of the whole Cool Britannia thing, and with kind of we kind of look back a little bit embarrassed or cringy or sneery, and we shouldn't. It did feel like an exciting period. We have this kind of, it's okay to like the Union Jack again. Bear in mind, my granddad didn't let me watch English sports every time I went back to Ireland. I wasn't even allowed to, he called the Union Jack the Butcher's Apron, so I had all this in my head. Suddenly it's okay to like the Union Jack again. These incredible bands giving the soundtrack, and then the Euros happened. So you've got, and I've always been an Irish supporter, but you've got this incredible whammy after whammy of, well, it's a great time to be alive. And you can romanticise about that, but that's how it felt. And I'm not the only person I've spoken to that feels that,
By now, Oasis weren't just a band. They were a cultural force, permeating every part of British life, from the way we talked, the way we walked, and the way we dressed. Here's Johnny Hopkins.
Liam, at those early shows, and when, he was coming into the office and everything, he'd wear M&S jumpers and Next anoraks. On anybody else, they'd have looked rubbish, but on Liam, he made them look super cool just because he had that presence and knew how to wear clothes. You know, I'd often go up to him and say, "Where'd you get that from? That looks incredible." And the answer would almost always be M&S or Next. All of the band played the part, you know, including Bonehead and Griggs and Tony McCarroll. All of them could look like ordinary people that you'd meet on the street or at a football match or something, but they also at the same time had rock star quality.
Their background really is integral to the story. I don't mean the specific individual family backgrounds, but the fact that they did grow up on a council estate and they are, you know, hardcore working class. That's what made. Well, you know, you look at. It's funny, isn't it, that the working class band's always trying to dress up and the middle class bands try and dress like scruffy pigs, don't they? Like they haven't got two bob to rub together. It always makes me laugh that you look at 60s bands like Small Faces, working class East End lads, for mods, you know. The Oasis were the 90s equivalent, weren't they? Council estate kids who were super sharp dressed.
Let's face it wasn't about what you wore, it was about how you wore it. And there was a certain thing, there was a certain length of jean that had to, you know, the jeans had to be worn a certain length where they're just, the back of the jean is just clipping the ground, just literally, and there's a slightly frayed effect on the jean. There was that weird moment where there was a photo shoot for one of the singles which employed all members of the band to wear duffel coats. But the brilliant thing about that was it just didn't catch on. No one wanted to wear a duffel coat again.
Why are you wearing a duffel coat when everyone else is in shorts, T-shirts?
I see, but the thing is, at about 11 o'clock when they're all freezing to death, I'll be walking around with a duffel coat and it's for sale if anybody wants to buy it. About 650 quid or something. So I can sell that. I've got a box of them in the van actually.
The check shirt, the untucked button-down check shirt, that was obviously something that was very much part of the look.
As any street fashion, working class street fashion, it gets finely tuned. So this is one thing it's a sad thing now because of the internet. You look at like teen fashion now, it's the same all over. They all look exactly the same and it isn't moving very fast at all either. Whereas back then, Manx would be wearing mad flares in 1984. I could document months by which the fashion was changing. In 1982 or 3, everybody was dressed up to the nines in Fila, Lacoste, Armani. By 84, the brands had gone and it become like just a button-down shirt, crew neck lambswool jumper from Marks and Sparks, flared, super flared cords that Manx were wearing. But the whole Oasis look is entirely derived from early to mid-80s football hooligan culture.
Why did that image strike a chord with people? Because it does look really cool, doesn't it? It looked cool.
Clint Boone from the Inspiral Carpets.
And it said a lot. It indicated something. It insinuated that these guys, they know the sport, they know the music, they know the fashion. They look like you shouldn't fuck with them. What young boy in Britain in the mid-90s wouldn't want to buy into that? You know, it's just perfect, wasn't it? And even now, a lot of middle-aged blokes now, you know, I'm sat here with a pretty green shirt on and just turned 60.
New Order's Peter Hook.
Oh, they were scooter boys. I was a scooter boy at 17 at the Parker. It's all part of the interesting things that have happened in my life.
But the look of the band was much more than the shirts on their backs. Close your eyes and think of the word Oasis. More than likely, you'll see bold white letters on a black background framed in a white box. This distinctive branding was thanks to Brian Cannon and his company, Microdot.
So I went along having a meeting with the band. I took along with me a book of record sleeves, but I took this book just to see what they were into and what they weren't into. In that book, there was an early Rolling Stones album, and it had a picture of the band on there, and in the corner there was the Decca logo, the logo of the record company. Back then in the 60s, the record companies would put their logo on the front of the record as well. And I just thought it looked amazing. If you took all the type off and just had that box logo in the corner, and it didn't say Decca, it said Oasis. That was the answer. So I went away working on that, and because we were all into Adidas trainers, I used the same font. But from a distance, it looked like Oasis, because the O and the A are very, very similar. You know, they're rounded off with just a bar on the A. So then what I did was live demonstration cassette with a Union Jack on the front, which was designed by a guy called Tony French. They used I think it's Helvetica Black Oblique, like an italicised version of a really bold Helvetica. So that's where the font came from. They'd used it previously on a demo tape. So I combined that font with the Decca logo to come up with, boom. We ended up with like what I would call a McDonald's-style branding exercise, which I'd never really seen applied to a band before. And if you look at the sleeves, the whatever sleeve, it's just a picture of some moorland. There's nothing in it. It's literally a barren landscape. There's that, a riot breaking out in a hotel room, or two guys walking down a street in Soho. But it all connects together because you've just got that little badge in the corner.
And after nailing the logo, Brian was hired to design the sleeve for Definitely Maybe. Shot in the front room of Bonehead's house in Manchester, that image of Liam lying stretched out on the stripped pine flooring, Noel perched on the sofa strumming his guitar, and the rest of the band watching TV has become one of the most iconic record sleeves in rock history.
Whilst it looks nothing like it, the inspiration I took it from is there's a Beatles album called Oldies But Goldies, which is an official Beatles record, but it was released after the event. It was in the 70s, I believe. It's a compilation, obviously. And the front's got like an Art Deco cartoon image on it, and the back is a shot of them in a dressing room in Japan. But, you know, they're just smoking and just leaning over. It's just a proper fly-on-the-wall shot, and like I say, it doesn't look anything like it. But that was kind of the inspiration, you know. When I was doing my art A-level, I'd studied lots of different types of art. That style of visual metaphor dropping, if you like, was lifted from Renaissance paintings, like Jan van Eyck. The Arnolfini Wedding is one that I often cite. You know, the function of art back then was decorative, and because people didn't have televisions or there's no mass printing going on, this is how they expressed stories, if you like, on a two-dimensional still image. All the metaphors, visual metaphors in Definitely Maybe. I went round to the sound guy, was a guy called Mark Coyle, and I think he lived with Phil Smith, who was also the band's roadie. And I went round their house, and in their house they had an area what Phil used to call Heroes Corner. And we just lifted loads of bits from there that we then dropped into the sleeve, one being the Burt Bacharach image, because it's Noel's favourite songwriter, obviously. There's George Best, and then there's Rodney Marsh, who's the other footballer, played for Man City, obviously. Still on the television screen is on a VHS. We stopped it on that image, you know. It's from The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, the guy choking him, trying to get information as to where the gold is. I thought it was just a bonus for the fans to do something beyond what was actually required. That's what we did.
Clint Boone.
When Oasis arrived on the scene publicly, the reason why it all had so much integrity and it looked so much like a well-designed brand was because Noel knew what he was doing. He knew everything. He knew the importance of putting out a cool cassette tape with, you know, just the word Oasis written on the front of the Union Jack. He knew that how to present the best band the UK were ever going to see. He had a master plan.
Coming up on the final episode of Listen Up, we'll hear how the master plan went supersonic.
You're like, wow, this really is accelerating at a velocity that very, very few bands get to experience.
And the picture that came to define an era.
The pictures that have endured from that period, that is one of them.
Plus, what's the one song on Definitely Maybe you'd take to a desert island?
Every time they played live, they always just completely nailed it. And it was such a good sing-along song, so that always has a special place in my heart.
Thank you for listening. And don't forget, the remastered version of Definitely Maybe is available on all services to stream and download now. This was a Cop and Nuzzle production for Big Brother Recordings.
Licensed courtesy of BBC Studios.